Good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Internet Radio. You have myself, Alan James, and unfortunately we don't have Stephen with us tonight because Stephen was pulled away. He's unfortunately busy, but we have a little message from Stephen which I'm going to play shortly, just in a minute. Okay, we have communication channels. There's going to be email and the chat facility, obviously, and we have a guest book on the website as well. And if you want to phone us, you can call us on 046 927 1212. Now, obviously, with Stephen not here, I'm kind of running everything, and I need hands like an octopus. So there's a few manual things that are going to be happening. But we have a guest presenter with us, JayPee from Wolf Spirit Radio. I'm going to be bringing JayPee in a minute. But I'm just going to play this message for you from Steve. He just sends his apologies.
Hi, everybody. Unfortunately, I cannot be in studio with Alan this evening because my wife is still in the hospital after giving birth last Monday to a bouncing baby girl, 7 pound 2 ounces. Her blood pressure is still a little up and down, my wife's blood pressure, so they haven't released her just yet, so it means I'm kind of doing a little bit of running around, and unfortunately I cannot be in studio this evening with Alan. I'm sure Alan will forgive me for not being there, and he will have to press a couple of more buttons, but I'm sure he will do it as only he can, with professionalism. A little compliment there. So when I am back next week, he won't be giving out to me. But thanks to everyone who sent in the emails of congratulations for my wife and myself. It actually meant a lot, and it's nice to know that we do have some friends out there who we've never met, but who are thinking about us. It actually does mean a lot. So, on with the show. I'd just like to wish Alan a good show. Have a good show. Break a leg. Or not. I hope the equipment doesn't start acting up. And hopefully I will be back in the driving seat as co-host next week. Okay. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that was a message from Steve there. He apologises for not being on the show, but unfortunately needs must. As I say, the wife's just not well at the moment, so he's in there taking care of things there. So I hope everything goes okay there, Steve, and I hope BA gets well pretty soon so she's home quite quickly. Now, without further ado, I think we should bring our guest in tonight. A guest presenter, a guest co-host is JayPee from Wolf Spirit Radio. Good evening, JayPee. How are you doing?
Hello there, Alan. How are you doing? Hello, everybody. It's nice to be over here on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, listen, thanks a lot for coming on. There's a little bit of an echo there, I think, in the background. Don't know whether you can hear that, JayPee.
No, it's probably just as you coming over the speakers. Yeah, no, I haven't got the echo running.
Okay,
I do have an echo unit on the thing.
Okay.
On the desk. But anyway, so yeah, so I'm in northern Scotland, and so we're going to have a little Great Britain roundtable tonight.
I think we are. I think we're going to have a good chat with Tony as well when we get Tony on shortly. I'd just like to say that for some reason on the TNS players, only the fast player is actually working. The slow player for some reason is not connecting up. I don't know why. So if you want to, people on TNS there, if you just want to listen to OYM on the fast player, you'll pick us up on that. The United We Strike player as well is down at the moment as well. And they had issues with that, I think, yesterday. So if you won't be able to listen on the UWS player for now. But obviously, if you go to OYM Ireland and click on Air Player, you'll be able to hear us there. So just before we get stuck into things, just a couple of things, JayPee, as myself and Steve normally do. There's a few things that we're going to catch up with. And as I said, on the show tonight, we're going to bring Tony from These Changing Times Radio. He's going to be coming on in a few minutes, and we're going to be catching up with everything and anything, because obviously JayPee being a radio host and Tony being a radio host, it's going to be a fantastic chat, because I've spoke to JayPee and Tony individually for hours on Skype talking about everything and anything. So a good knowledge pool of information between everybody, I think. But there's a couple of things I just want to go through first. As usual, a couple of announcements. Now, one of the things I came across, before I mention that actually, just for people who know about Reverend Asher's Andrew on TNS Radio, I popped down to Andrew a couple of times this week, and Andrew's doing well, and things are going well. No sign of anybody turning up trying to evict him as of yet, from what I know. But if there's any other news on that, I'm sure you'll find out from TNS anyway. And I'll probably be back down with Andrew during the week. I'll probably try and get back down and see how he is. But, okay, one of the things that Max Igon said on the show, which I thought was very interesting, is that obviously, people are very upset about the government at the moment, and JP, you know yourself in the UK, they're very upset the way the government is running things at the moment. But we do need, Max was saying that we still need a government, but we only need a government to administer the infrastructure of the country, not to make laws to stop and restrict the freedoms of the people. And I think you probably agree with that as well.
Well, I'd say, I'm really looking forward to a return to common law. It's what I call galactic law, because it's the same throughout the galaxy. And what we understand from people we talk to, that it's the same. That galactic law is common law, which means if there's no crime, there's no victim, there's no crime. And that's, it sounds really far out, but that's like planetary law. It's the basic law of all traditional tribes, natives all over the world, and it's only this kind of this controlling elite that tries to con us into thinking that we're part of their society, which we're not. They're in a club which we ain't in.
Exactly.
And their rules apply to their society, but not to us, and we're only fooled into it. So I keep saying to the police, I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand. They think I'm stupid.
Yeah, well, that's the best way to be, to say, look, if you don't understand it, because, the way they put legalese, it looks like English, but they use it completely different. So you're better off saying, I don't understand. And just another note for somebody, as I say, just a few things on the list. Last Monday, I was supposed to be on the Miss Jones show, but unfortunately, Miss Jones was suffering technical problems with her internet provider. So, unfortunately, the show didn't go ahead. So, apologies if anybody popped over there to listen to the show, but it was kind of a last-minute thing where she just said too much trouble with the internet, so she couldn't run with the show. So, not to worry, but it's just one of them things. We all have to rely on the internet, and at times, yourself here at OYM, we'd had a couple of near misses in the past regarding internet going down and having to at one time go down to Steve's place, OYM number 2, and do the show from there. So, and just another thing on the list here, you probably heard as well, I don't know, people, there was an issue during the week. We're trying to get these people on. There's a group of farmers, a company called Friends First, it's a bank, sent their thugs down to take a 12-year-old tractor off the farmer. Now, I don't know the full ins and outs, but apparently a scuffle broke out, and his son, which is 16, ended up getting 2 broken ribs. Now, I don't remember that being part of our constitution, that thugs can go down from banks and beat people up to try and reclaim property. So apparently what they did is the farmers said enough is enough, and they went down to the offices of Friends First, and are now holding the office to ransom. They're actually in the building, and they've closed the doors, and they're not letting anybody in, and they're saying enough is enough. So what we're trying to organise is we're trying to get them on the phone. Maybe in the next week we're going to try and organise that and have a chat with them and find out exactly what the details are. But whatever they are, no company has a right to send the thugs in to beat up people. It shouldn't be. If anything, that's where the police should be. The police should be there to keep the peace, and they should have taken them people away for doing that. But we'll try and find out the details as much as we can, and then we'll keep you posted and let you know. And obviously, another happy, good bit of news there, that we reached our target for the frequency counter. So, thanks to everybody who donated to the frequency counter. We are now looking for a location, and we have one location in mind already, which is not far from us, and it's out in the middle of nowhere, which is what we need. We don't want any interference from radio frequencies and from mobile phone masts and stuff like that. And once we confirm the location's okay and the people don't have a problem with us doing some testing there, we'll be able to start scanning people for microchip. Now, JP, I don't know whether you're aware of this, have you looked at Lars and Jesse doing their microchip scanning?
No, I haven't. Do they have can they generate the frequency that turns these things on, and then measure the frequency that's coming off them?
Well, to be honest with you, there's two types, and so far what they've found is that they're active transmitters rather than passive. So they don't really they haven't found that they needed to send a current to activate it. It just works. And they've picked up the actual chip in people. If you go onto their website, I'll have to post it up somewhere, but on their website, you actually have video footage. If you go to YouTube and just type in Jesse Belchan and Lars Judgaard, you'll actually see them scanning people, and you'll see them coming up with finding microchips in people, which is quite frightening. So what we did is we bought the same equipment that they have, and also a frequency counter. So we want to start scanning people and to check to see if they've been microchipped for people in Ireland. So that's the plan of attack, really.
Right. All right. Well, it's just 11:11 here, PST. I have to work in PST because my radio station, Wolf Spirit Radio, is stationed in west coast of America. So I'm always in PST, which is a bit weird because I live in GMT. But anyway, meanwhile, so you've got this device now. These things are like standard readers. You know, when you have like a barcode reader. You can just plug them in like a USB, it plugs in like a keyboard, and allows you to access the database. Is there not a device you can do that can pick up that just plugs a USB and it'll scan an RFID chip?
There are devices out there, but you need to be away from all technology, and this is just a standalone scanner which covers from 1 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, and that's quite a range of frequency to cover.
That is plenty of range.
Yeah, and that's what you need, because a lot of the time these microchips are in the higher frequency on the gigahertz. So this is why they're handy to be able to make them portable, so you can carry them around and go to places where, because again, one thing that Lars and Jesse found out with what they do is that some places have it's very populated with smog. With frequencies from mobile phones and Wi-Fi from pubs and all that kind of stuff. So you need a portable device to be able to move away and go somewhere quiet, somewhere where there's no signals around the place. And these devices are quite good for doing that, and they've been very, very successful with using them. So, why change it if they're working well,
Yeah. So that's very interesting, because I've worked. My main work up to now has been IT. So, looking at things like barcode scanners and RFID chip scanners, these things don't put out much information. They only put out like a single string of numbers, just like it's a database key. Each one is unique. And once they inject it into you, they'll have a barcode that will say this is the one. And essentially, it's just like an identifier. So what would be really cool is if we could delete these identifiers from the database, or delete the links between them. That's the thing. But one of the things that I've wondered, being I'm sort of crazy inventor kind of thing. And these cigarette lighters that do that?
Yeah.
They create a 500-volt spark from a small piece of crystal that is hit by a little hammer. And I'm just waiting to find an electronics genius who can create a cascade circuit and a little coil, so that when you hit that, it looks like a regular lighter, but inside is an EMP generator.
Okay.
That you just have to click that, and it sends a vastly amplified EMP pulse, electromagnetic pulse, that would, these things destroy electronics.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So basically, that you have a short-range EMP device that can, that looks like a cigarette lighter, that can destroy RFID chips. That's my kind of mind idea. That's what I want to see. Well,
it's a good idea, but we did talk about this, and what Lars and Jesse were concerned about was the fact that you need to. They were saying you need to destroy the circuit on the board if you destroy the board, then that could have a detrimental effect if it's inside you in your body.
Yes, in a little glass capsule.
Yeah. So we don't know if we, because we were thinking of, signal field generators to ramp up the power and blow them and destroy them that way, but we don't know what would happen. So it's a subject matter that we could definitely get into. But what I want to do first, before we get Tony in, I just want to say to the listeners as well that I have a pre-record of James and Paul, who are unlawfully arrested a few weeks ago by the Gardai Síochána, and I recorded this today with James and Paul, and I'm going to be playing this about 8:20, because what they have to say, what happened, and what they're doing is very important, and I think people will be interested in listening to what happened to them, and the way Ireland is now becoming a police state. Really, they're being arrested for not breaking the law as opposed to breaking the law. But we will play that later on, and we'll get Tony and we'll get JP's viewpoint on that after we play it. But before we bring Tony in, I was going to talk about the budget, because somebody said to us last week, are you going to have a kind of budget radio show? But JP is obviously not familiar with the Irish budget, so maybe we'll actually leave it till next week when we have our guest on next week. But JP, before we bring Tony in, just give us a quick synopsis of what you do and Wolf Spirit Radio and what you're into and all that kind of stuff.
Woo, right. Well, as I say, I kind of do lots of various different things, and I've got lots of interest in various areas. But the main one is of energy and of frequency. Now we're all very familiar with the spectrum of colours, and we're all very familiar with the scale of notes on the piano. But essentially, they are the same thing, just at different frequencies. And then between those and around those, all those other frequencies, they all occur in octaves, and that all connects with this science that I call the science of the seven rays, or is called the science of the seven rays, that having frequency and color and form of geometry all have connections with specific notes. So, for instance, if you have an A in one octave and the A in another octave, it's the same note. There's a resonance there. And so you find that in absolutely everything, because everything is frequency, that there are relationships that work out, and it's the same as using music. It's the musical relationships relate colors in the same way, but we also have things called qualities that are like, for instance, the quality. As everybody's familiar with astrology nowadays, everybody's familiar with the idea of the quality of a Pisces or the quality of an Aries and stuff like that. So the seven are basically a condensation of that, because we've got 12 signs. And those 12 signs condense into the seven rays, and the seven rays condense further into the three. And that's the same as your red, green, and blue, or in music, the major triad, and the geometry of the three platonic solids, of three basic platonic solids. And then, so the way everything relates has a very predictable relationship. And so, even if you don't know what you're talking about, you can talk about it, because there is a correspondence everywhere in nature to the seven rays, and it is a completely natural science. And it relates to nature, because nature is full of sevens. You see sevens everywhere, and they all relate, and they relate to the chakras in our bodies, and there's a direct relationship between chakras and notes and geometric forms and things like that. So anyway, that's what I've been studying for the last 20 years, and in the last 4 years I've been doing it on the radio, talking about people and how their relationship rays work with the way that their soul and their personality interact, and that's the evolution of humanity, how people move from the personality energy to the soul energy. And that's what we're all going through on an unconscious level, and some of us are on a conscious level, but most people are on an unconscious level. We're all evolving to be becoming actually more soulful, which is why people are becoming more outraged at the things that are happening, and yet there are people who are completely trapped by the powers that be in their propaganda. And that, again, there's an explanation about the rays and the certain ray, which is called the sixth ray, which is the thing that catches everybody on the planet, unless you worked your way out of that energy.
Well, we were talking about the nights around the round table. We were talking about exactly that. We were talking about energy and the waking up process and how people are moving away from the mainstream media. But hold that thought there, JP, because what I want to do is I want to bring Tony in, and we'll get an introduction to Tony as well, and go through what Tony's doing. And just to, obviously what I said earlier, that JP is a host of World Spirit Radio and Tony is a host of These Changing Times Radio. And having two other hosts on the show, radio hosts, as far as I'm concerned, I'm delighted to have these two guys on, because there's so much information that Tony and JP have. So we'll be just talking about anything and everything, whatever comes up, and we might be ducking and diving and switching and changing, but hey, that's going to be the fun of the show. But we just want to bring Tony in there. Tony, good evening to you. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad at all, Alan. Yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. Tony, thanks for coming on. Much appreciated. Before we get into any conversations, just give us a heads up on what you're doing and your background, and then we can get cracking and talking about a few bits and pieces.
Yeah, no problem at all. What am I doing? I'm doing various radio shows. We're doing TCT, These Changing Times. We're also doing a show in the States called Freedom Reigns on Blog Talk. Also, I'm working with a couple of people, Kate of Gaia, who's working in the law and the legal system, as it were, and she's a co-host on Freedom Reigns with me. There's another show she's doing on Awake Radio as well, so there's that one going on. Santos has got his own shows on America Radio as well, and Santos's work is incredible, as well as Kate's, etc. So we're all sort of practically moving in the same circles, trying to get the same message across to the people or the populace. And I mean, as far as my input goes, I wrote a book and released it on the 1st of January 2012, called Blueprints of Cosmic Consciousness, which was all about tying all of these things, these bits of the puzzle, in together. And what do they actually mean when we do tie them in together? And if that is indeed the picture that we get when we tie all these pieces together, well, what are we going to do about it? And it explores some of the solutions to the problems that we face in this situation / society. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what I do, that's what it's about, and it's all about getting the message over to the populace of what's actually happened, what's gone on, why it's gone on, and what we can do about it from this point forward.
Excellent. And I'd just like to say that your book in PDF format is available on OYM. If you go to the front of the website and go to recent articles, Tony's two books are on there, so you can download it for free. Thanks to Tony for letting us do that. And you can download Tony's book and have a read of it. Now, obviously, guys, with everything going on at the moment, with the energy changes, we're going to have to talk about 2012. We have to talk about it because there's so much going on. There's so much awakening on the planet. And people waking up, people realising that, it's like the Wizard of Oz, and we know there's loads of symbolism in the Wizard of Oz because that's the way it's written. And it's like the curtains being pulled back, and we're seeing the wizard. People are seeing the wizard, and they're saying it's not this big scary voice. It's the guy behind running all the buttons and pushing the buttons and twiddling the knobs. So, and I don't know about you, but I feel definitely just some energy changes taking place there. So I'll just go over to you, JP, first, if you want to kind of give me a synopsis on what you think, and then we'll pass it over to Tony.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about the wave, because I think this is the most important thing, and it's all right. Okay. So first of all, what we got to imagine is that we're looking at the Earth, and then we're zooming out from the solar system. We're zooming out from the solar system further out until we can see the galaxy, and the galaxy has right at the center a black hole. They call it the Dark Rift. The Mayans called it Hunab Ku, and it's, strangely enough, 26,000 light years from here. And when this central black hole emits a pulse of energy, it's like a ripple in a pond. So it spreads out from the center and goes out towards the edges. And this happens on a periodic basis, various sub-levels, but there's a big wave that is sent out every so many million years. And this happens to be something like 26 million years. And what they've discovered in fossil records is if every time they look at the fossil records and they look at like 26 million years ago, there's an evolutionary jump. It's a complete jump. It's what they call a quantum leap. You know, it goes from one state to another without anything in between. There's no missing link, so to speak. And it turns out, you know, it goes from one creature to a completely new creature, like the next version up. So that's the first thing that is going to be our impulse for evolution. And that, I believe, now this is from my spiritual guides, and, you know, I'm at odds with everybody else, but I don't care. But I believe on the 22nd, this wave will arrive. Okay, now that happens to be the day after the galactic alignment. So what's happening is that the sun is more or less exactly at the same place as the galactic central sun, which means it's kind of like an eclipse. Our sun is eclipsing the galaxy. So we've had solar eclipses and lunar eclipses in the last couple of months, more than ever, really. That's because everything's kind of lining up. It's like the hands of the clock, where the minute hand and the second hand and the hour hand all come to the same point at the same time, and that's the lineup that is going to happen on the 21st, and so the sun is going to be directly between us and the galactic center. Now, I don't know where the moon is going to be. I think it's going to be sort of hanging out on the other side. But it's like we're going to get a galactic eclipse. So in a way, it's like, and when you have an eclipse, it's like when the moon occludes the sun, for instance, as it did a few weeks ago, and I think everybody felt this. It was like suddenly it's like your source, it's like you're running on a laptop and the mains has been disconnected, but you're still running on your own batteries, but they're not quite as good, and the screen goes a bit dim and everything. And then gradually the sun comes back into view, and it's like plugging the mains back in. So we're going to get a galactic version of that for a day. Then the next day, the wave arrives. That hits the sun. Now, there are many stories about what happens when that wave hits the sun. Some people say that the sun is going to go out. Some people say that the sun is going to transform. If you're thinking about what happens, what the next level of evolution is for a star, you can just think about what happens when you heat a piece of metal. It starts off as dark. Then it glows red, and then it grows yellow, and then it glows white, and then it goes blue, white, and blue. So the hotter it gets. So that's what stars do. As they're heating up, as they heat up, they evolve. They evolve, and they heat up. And a planet expands. That's all the earthquakes and stuff that's going on just now. The planet is expanding from the inside due to the pressure of the plasma inside. Which creates new matter and creates a build-up. So the planet has to expand. All these things are all happening at the same time. Now, other people also say that there's a planet X or a Nibiru or a Wormwood or a dark star that is a binary part of our solar system where this thing comes whizzing by every 1800 years. So that's another cycle. But it just happens that this cycle comes at the same time. So people talked about the heavy mass object. It's a huge monopole magnet. That means that it's not north and south, it's just north, which means it will attract our south pole as it goes by. Now, I don't know about any science on this. Obviously, they would hide it, but there have been a lot of infrared telescopes sent up to space to create a kind of picture of this thing coming in. So somebody somewhere, and it's interesting that the Vatican's got an infrared telescope, somebody somewhere is watching this thing happening, but it's not in the news because all we hear about is Rihanna and other people like that. But anyway, we have an evolutionary impulse coming towards us, and I believe that it's going to happen on the 22nd. That something weird is going to happen with the sun. In terms of anything, something weird is going to be happening because we're also hitting the thing which is called the time wave zero. Now, I noticed that Tony is ZPE, so he's very interested in the 0 point, the source of everything. So I'll let him blather on about that. But essentially, the way we perceive this wave that's coming from the center of the galaxy, we're looking at a disk edge on. So we don't see a ripple, we don't see a round thing. We see a flat thing coming towards us, and it will appear as a ribbon. Now, people who have been involved in black ops and the chronovisor experiments, which allow you to look through time. This is like the machine that they made in Contact. You know the film Contact? They have
the looking glass technology,
gimbal thing spinning around. That's a reflection of this machine that they built in that was used as a device called a chronovisor, which allows you to look in space and time. You know, you can project with your thoughts. It's an ET device, recovered ET device that allows you to look backwards and forwards, and it's like watching a video of some other time. It reads the Akashic records, which some people might be familiar with, but basically it's a reader of Akashic records. Anyway, so when they looked in towards this moment, particularly the moment that we're talking about, which is in 2 weeks' time, there was a flickering between what they call two timelines. And one of them was a dark and despairing timeline, where everything was really bad, and another one where everything was really good and everybody had a free will and a lovely time. And this is Bill Brockbrader, who has been appearing on Wolf Spirit Radio, even though he's been in jail. His girlfriend Eva Moore has been getting him to talk from jail about the stuff that he's been into. But he had to analyze the output of this device, this chronovisor, or the yellow book they called it. And although he didn't see it in operation, he was given all the files. Because he was a super genius, they wanted him to figure out a way to make that second timeline happen. And the story is that every time somebody tried to make the second timeline happen, because the second timeline involves the crushing of free will, so the second timeline is of no free will for humanity. Every time they tried to do something, they were exercising free will, and they were pushing the first timeline, which is everybody's got free will. So the universe is not allowing free will or non-free will. It's only allowing free will to happen, and it's forcing it to happen. So we're going to be forced onto the good timeline as long as we have free will in our lives. So any exercise of free will in terms of setting your intent, purely desiring something for you or your family, or for your clan or for your community, to move from a place of obeying orders to deciding what you want. That is the exercise of free will, and that will bring you onto the first timeline, and everything will be fine. So really, don't do what anybody tells you. Do what you feel like doing, and that will bring you onto the better timeline. And
I think it's important to say, do what you feel, not what you think. Feeling is better. Tony, what do you think?
What do you feel?
What do you feel? Sorry. Yeah, what do you feel?
Yeah, about which bit?
Well, what do you feel about? What do you feel about? What do you feel? Everything talking about 21st of December and the whole kind of change in the wave and everything else. What do you feel in yourself is going to happen?
It's going to be brilliant. It's going to be awesome. We're in for the ride of our lives. I mean, that's the beauty of it. Getting that information across to people is the driving force behind what I'm actually trying to do. And I agree with practically everything you just said. I'm guessing that you've got this information about the coronavirus from Drake. Now, I must admit, I don't follow Drake at all, to be totally frank with you.
No, I didn't.
The point being, the Vatican, or the coronavirus has been hidden by the Vatican for a long time. There's lots of other time travel systems. There's colontic ketones, which have also been used, again, frequencies. There's the looking glass technology that Dan Birch talks about in Project Camelot interviews, etc., which is a piece of machinery, the ET machinery, agreed, that was actually used to study these timelines and the various timelines and the variations thereof. And he's got all the information. People can go and look that up and listen to his interviews. And there's also other other time travel technology, which people like Bob Dean or Robert Dean talk about, whereby he was actually taken, this is one example, there are many, many, many examples. He was actually taken on board a ship, and he was taken to another planet for a period, I think he said about 6 weeks. He spent 6 weeks being taught various things by these other people on these other planets, and learning things from the Akashic Records, which you've mentioned. But the kick in the pants when Bob actually explains it is when they brought him back just after he left. And that's like, again, it's another version of time travel technology. The CIA have been using time travel technologies for a long time. You can listen to people like Andy Bisaggio, Laura Eisenhower. All of these people are detailed in the book, by the way, so you won't have to write this down as quick as I'm saying it. It's already there. And there's so many different versions of time travel experiences that have occurred all over the place, from the man banging his head under a sink, going into the future and videoing himself with his self 50 years into the future, approximately. There's experiments that were done in Antarctica, whereby they were releasing weather balloons. Again, they're all detailed. And what they actually did was release I can't remember the words I'm looking for, but a weather balloon into the Antarctic air that measures different things in the atmosphere. In other words, carbon dioxide levels and all sorts of other weird and wonderful stuff. And they let this balloon up in Antarctica, and it measured a different time, and I think it was coming back saying it had just been measuring 1963 or something silly like that, and this was not too long ago. And they pulled the balloon back down because it was still on a wind-up coil, and they reset all the computers, let it up into exactly the same spot again. They got the same results. They pulled the balloon back down, wiped the hard drive again, and then tested it a third time, and they got exactly the same results again. When they did this, the balloon vanished. It disappeared, but it was obviously still there because the rope was taut. And there's all sorts of other things, reference time and time travel, that point to the fact that we have actually got time travel technology. Not that we just have got it, we've had it for a very, very long time. Just on that note alone. So yeah, time travel, there's the jump chair that was used to actually go forward and see 2012, or beyond 2012. Every time they hit 2012, there was a flat line whereby nobody could see beyond that date. And all these things, you see, we've been told that this stuff doesn't exist. It's only H.G. Wells or in the movies. But again, it's another con. So it's unraveling the level of the con that we've actually been faced with. And that's one of the things that I do. I try and explain to people, well, look, actually we are in a holographic universe. Everything is harmonics, as in looking at Bruce Cathay's work, harmonic code, etc. And we're not in a Newtonian physical universe, which is what we were told we were in. But then again, everything we've been told is wrong, so hey, that doesn't surprise everybody. And beautiful, and basically all of these things that are wonderful, incredible technologies are all going to start coming to the surface now. So what sort of a future can we look forward to? Well, in my opinion, an absolutely amazing future with free energy, with anti-gravity, which has been proven, no question about it. Look up Mehan Kesh, look up Professor Jonathan Searle, look up John Hutchinson, his work at levitating objects. all of this stuff, when you go through the book, you'll see it's actually there. So yeah, it's going to be a beautiful future. Extra long lives. It's beyond our imagination, because when we can actually get our hands on this technology, which has been hidden, of course, then everything's going to change, including off-world travel. So, hey, bring it on. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, well, I'm going to, open it up to the question and just pass it over to JayPee. JayPee, we hear people talking about this moving from the 3rd to the 4th and 5th dimension, and obviously the benefits of moving over to these dimensions. Do you think, one of the things I've seen video talking about this change is that they gave us 4 levels. There was 4 levels, they said. We've got the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Silver Age, and the Golden Age. And we are now coming out on the cusp of the Iron Age and going into the Bronze Age. And this is the change that's going to take place. Now, obviously there's been a lot of talk with people about the whole ascension thing and, changing dimensions and stuff. And we know 1 or 2 people that we have talked about, who talk about, by January 2014, we'll all be in the 4th dimension or whatever. And for people who are kind of listening and who kind of are more kind of practical and don't understand this, what they mean by this, can you give us a kind of a heads up on what you think this might mean to people, or what may happen?
Yeah, all right. Okay, so from the perspective of the teachings that I've been talking about, these ancient teachings, they've been here since like Lemuria and Atlantis, and it's still true because everything is frequency. From what I can gather, the process which we call ascension or moving to 5D or all of these things is equivalent to what these teachings called initiation. And in years gone by, because of the density of the astral plane on this planet, the possibility of moving through these dimensions and ascending was really difficult. It really took a very strong and evolved soul. And our planetary avatar, or the planetary logos, the mind of the planet, has been here a very long time and came from somewhere else, as we will all one day become planetary logoi. We'll all have our own planet. Just imagine, a planet that is like you. According to the teachings, the movement from where we are to where we'll be is actually, it's like you don't move anywhere. It's not a movement in terms of where you are located. It's a movement in terms of how your consciousness acts and how you perceive and interact with the world. So, for instance, I'm going to use three words: physical, emotional, and mental. Okay, and they describe 3 of the subtle bodies in our physical being. But they also describe the stages of the movement from 3D to 5D, because 3D is physical, 4D is emotional, and 5D is mental. So the plane of the soul is the 5th plane. It's on the mental plane. And so when we get to 3D, when we get to 5D, we'll be connected at one with our soul, which is part of the collective. We don't really have an individual soul. We're a collective entity which expresses as human beings. So really, like, if you want to think of it, you could say that the monad energy, the oversoul, is like the trunk of a tree, and the soul is like a branch, and extended into twigs, and that's when you have these soul collectives and soul families. And human beings are like the leaves. The leaves grow on the tree during spring. They do their job in summer to turn light into sugar, and then in autumn they die, and then they come back the next year. And so you could say that that's an analogy for reincarnation. So when you, instead of identifying as the leaf, when you identify with the tree, that's when you're getting to the being able to look at expression of the soul into the world. So the tree is pushing its leaf out into the world very slowly. And the soul pushes its expression, the personality, into the world. Now, the world is very confusing, and we often forget that we have a soul. We often forget that we are that soul. You know, a lot of people say, I'm trying to get hold of my higher self, and it's really difficult. No, it's not, because you are your higher self. Your higher self is expressing itself as you. And all you have to do is, just take a breath and roll your consciousness back a little bit from the front of things to the back of your mind. It's like rolling a marble down the inside of your brain, past your pineal gland, and looking at things from that perspective. And essentially, that's what's happening in the movement from 3D to 4D to 5D. So 3D is a physical expression. It's a physical people, places, things, consciousness. Your regular people, people who watch soap operas and do all that sort of stuff. That's physical. And then there's drama. Then all of that stuff. There's the emotional level. So you could say that we're already in the big drama. We're already in the fourth dimension, because we're seeing coming out in the news and all of these things. The Savile stuff and the Holly Gregg stuff and all of these. The dark side and the vulnerability of the powers that be. We're starting to see that. We're starting to see what they've done as well. And we're starting to see how vulnerable they are. So it's like we're moving from being a member of the audience in a theater to being actually on the stage and looking back and looking behind. And seeing, that these are just actors and they're waiting, when they walk on the stage, it's not like they've come in from another place, they just start walking, that you can see the stagecraft happening. Yeah. And when we get to the fifth dimension, which is the mental level of consciousness, what we're going to all see is that we're actually much more powerful than they, and we can organize ourselves. Thank you very much. And that is what is happening right now. All these Occupy movements all over the world. This is human spirit spontaneously organizing itself into councils and clans exactly as the way traditional people do.
Exactly.
Okay? So essentially it's a return to traditional
values.
On a higher turn of the octave.
Yeah. Well, Tony, you're saying that obviously there's going to be a big change. It's going to be really good. What's your perception of the 4th and 5th, and what do you think is going to be happening on the 21st and 22nd?
Okay, well, firstly, I agree with practically everything you've just said, JayPee. That's wonderful stuff. And yes, in answering that question, Alan, it's all to do with consciousness again, which is all about knowing what's been done, knowing how it's all affected us to this particular point, realizing, oh boy, have we been fooled, and then just saying, right, okay, I'm over it now, I'm going to dust myself off, pick myself up, and start to do something active or proactive about it. And that's exactly why I'm here with you today, having written the book, having done the radio shows, meeting up with people who are enlightened or who have maybe a better understanding and therefore maybe in a little better position to help people who are not at that position up a step. And so, yes, the dimensional jump is one of a conscious being rather than an unconscious being. Now, somebody that accepts vaccines, for example, okay, now what's actually happened, the reason that they accept vaccines is because they've given over their inalienable rights to somebody like a doctor who says he's qualified to do this stuff. He thinks he's doing the right sort of thing, and he's injecting vaccines into people thinking he's doing the right thing. The person that's having the vaccine has been told it's good for you, it'll help you, blah, 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 and they've given over their own rights to allow that to happen. And that's the point. It's not any longer of a case of just acquiescing to whatever they want to do to us. It's a case of we're now becoming conscious about what's in the vaccine, for example. When you realise squalene, thimerosal, cancer cells, animal cells, and all sorts of other fillers are in these vaccines, you may decide or make a conscious decision for yourself not to be injected. And that works on every level. And that's what JayPee was saying at a moment ago, and it's exactly spot on. We're deciding to become conscious of what's going on, and then, as a result of being conscious, we can then make the right choices and decide for ourselves whether or not we want to go along with that. And that is the dimensional change, because we are becoming awake, I suppose you could say, to what has been done, to what has been hidden, and to why it's been done and where it's going. And that's just beautiful. It's awesome. There can't be anything negative in that, apart from for the powers that be that were running things the way they wanted to run it. Because the game's up, the cat's left, the cat's out the bag or the horse is bolted. It's too late. So I'm looking forward to the next year. And as for what's actually going to happen, it's just going to be a more and more consciousness. It's awesome.
I hope that there is a video going around at the moment with a Mayan chap, and he talks about this 8 minutes of consciousness, awakeness, which we're going to experience on the 21st. And he said that they're using the Hadron Collider, the powers to be, the Cabal, to stop this conscious awakening from happening. But this Mayan elder and his people are putting around these so-called reverse systems where it'll have the reverse effect to the Hadron Collider. And they want to try and trap this 8 minutes of consciousness on the planet for about 3 months. And he's saying, make sure you have a pen and paper ready, because when this comes into you and this hits you, which is obviously the wave that JayPee was talking about, he said it's going to be phenomenal information. It'll just come in and you'll have all this kind of just knowing. You'll just have this knowing. Now, David Wilcox talks about this wave that they experimented with, part of the kind of photon belt. And I don't know whether you guys seen the documentary he did about the salamander and the frog. And they could actually transfer the DNA from one to the other, where actually the two of them touching each other, using this wave technology to prove that our DNA is being upgraded, which is what JayPee said earlier about we're going to become different people. So, again, is this part of the DNA activation? I don't know, but what's your take on that, JayPee?
Yeah, well, I read the whole of. I didn't read it actually. I listened to the audio book, which is of David Wilcox's book, which is a massive book, but it's brilliant. The Source Field Investigations, and it's all about gravity and that gravity is everything. And that everything is a function of the gravity wave. Actually, Tony, you mentioned various names. You mentioned Andrew Basiago and Laura Eisenhower. But there's one guy who's kind of been in the background of this, but he's very important. His name is William Stillings. And I've had him on my show a couple of times, and I absolutely love talking to him. He's an absolutely crazy scientist, genius level, beyond genius. And he's spoken on my show about how they worked with him, what it was about, how the time travel thing works, how gravity wave works. He says, he keeps saying gravity is a wave. It's not a force, it's a wave. And essentially, what they say is you become a wave, and then when you get to the other end, you become a particle again. How about that?
Well, that's actually, we're in the process of talking to Andrew to get him on the show, and I did actually have a Skype call with William one day about getting William on as well, because not only are they talking about the actual time travel, they're talking about the, going up to Mars. Now, for some people who don't kind of, it's not in their psyche to actually think of this. Some people just don't think of this. They just want to see the 3D day-to-day stuff. And all that is science fiction, and, yeah, that's madness to some people. But to other people, like William, Andrew, and probably yourselves, that have experienced and come across this kind of stuff, it's quite fascinating. And I think it is. It definitely opens your minds to when you hear these people talk. But something has come to mind, and it's something I want Tony to talk about. And JayPee, I'd like you to comment on it as well, if you have any knowledge of this. Tony, we were talking on one of the shows we did together, and you were telling me about the Djinn. So, can you give us some information. Can you tell us what you know about the Djinn? And I don't know whether JayPee knows about them, but if you kind of tell us your experiences of the Djinn, I'd like people to know about that as well, because I was told by, let's just say I was told by somebody that I should be talking about the Djinn more, but not obviously in a negative way, but from a more informational point of view. So, Tony, if you could kind of give us a synopsis on the Djinn and who they are.
Yeah, you like throwing people in at the deep end, don't you?
Sorry, mate.
Okay, if you thought time travel and travelling to Mars was that, it's probably not the best place to start with this. Okay, well...
I know it's changing the subject, and we're moving around, but I want to try and, if I can, keep it as practical or scientific in a way, and not go too kind of out into the stars, if you know what I mean.
Well, that's the wrong direction you're going in right
I know, yeah, I know. It's with the Djinn, I know, yeah. But I think it'd be good for people just give them a bit of a taster. Just say, look, here's the Djinn, go check it out for yourself. Here's what has been found out.
Okay. It's such a massive subject. We need to understand, as human beings on this planet, that we weren't the first ones here, right? There were things like dinosaurs that were hanging about before we got here, okay? So that being said, and that's just as a throwaway comment, and the same applies to out there in outer space, for example. We need to understand that we're down here and we're doing this let's call it a video game called The Matrix, where we're involved in this program on Earth called Genesis program, for example. So in other words, we need to, number one, firstly accept that there are, and there will always be other entities, either be it down here or out there, that were here a long time before we trotted up onto the planet, basically. So that being said, a lot of the entities that have disappeared, we've all heard about deep underground military bases, or a lot of us had. They're called DUMs. I had Stephen Kelly on we had Stephen Kelly on a couple of our shows a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the underground bases on the Getty, etc. In other words, what I'm trying to explain is we know about this stuff, it's out there, all right? You've just got to look at it and you'll see that. But my point is, there were entities on this planet before we actually got here, okay? Now, we know that with dinosaurs. It wasn't just the dinosaurs. There is also an element to the term evolution. So things that were one thing can, over time, the genetics can improve and get better and better and better, get bigger, stronger, faster, and we deal with the crap that's thrown at us day by day by day. So our gene pool gets stronger and stronger and stronger as a consequence of having to run with the evolution. In other words, if you've got a little old man who can't run and there's a wave coming, all the young kids get out the way and they're the ones that get to breed and evolve the genetics, if you like. Well, this has been going on a long time, way before, longer than we got here. So anyway, as a consequence of that, there are actual creatures that went underground, which is why I mentioned deep underground military bases, because just because the military is building them doesn't mean to say other races didn't as well. One of those particular races, and there are many, not just one or two, and this has already been admitted by the Ministry of Defence on the quiet, so most people didn't see it. There are already creatures inhabiting this world and have been long before we got here that are still here today. And the Djinn are being one of them. If you go to somewhere in, let's say, over by Mount Sinai, that area of the world, and you talk to some of the locals in the villages about the Djinn or the genies, and as soon as you mention the question, they'll stop. Whatever they're doing, they'll stop and they'll look at you as if to say, "What do you know about that?" In other words, there are creatures that are alive on this planet underground that have certain unbelievable abilities. They have incredible speed. They don't look anything like humans. They're like raptors that have evolved further into being highly telepathic, walking on two legs. There's actually a picture of one of these things that got caught in Guatemala. Now here's the biggie, because I actually know the guy that took this photograph, and I've actually been out to Mexico, and I've been out to Guatemala, and Belize, and looked at a lot of these mined things and the artifacts and the model planes that were found and the history. I've been through the museums and all sorts of different things. But the point is, these things do exist, and these things are real as you and I. And it's like the Greys, if you like. They've got every right to exist, the same as we have. Just because they're keeping the distance right now for the masses, doesn't mean to say they don't have any right to exist. And it's the same with these jinns. But one of the things with these jinns is that they have incredible, when I say incredible, that's a total understatement, they have absolutely fantastic abilities telepathically. Now, just to give you an example that I'm not, there's so much to this. If I asked anybody, where did the skull and bones come from? As in, the flag. A lot of people would stick their hand up and say, oh no, it's piracy. Or it's, it was the pirate ships and this, that and the other. What I'm actually saying is, no, where is the real origin of the skull and crossbones? Now, I don't think that there are people out there that can answer this, but they're very few and far between. The real origin of the skull and crossbones comes from the implication of these jinns or jinnies. And I'll post a link to a photograph whereby one of these jinnies was caught in Guatemala because it killed the daughter of a local farmer, villager, whatever he does for a living, I have no idea. The point is, it killed his daughter. Now, the villagers got together and they set up a wire trap. We've all seen how you can string a piece of wire across, and if you go running into something, it decapitates you. Well, they set up one of these traps. And basically, these things are like rabbits. They've got to run. They run across a certain direction. They follow their runs. And one of these trap wires was set up across one of its runs. And then at a certain time, a load of villagers actually started making a noise, and they all set a trap for it, basically. And this thing went running headlong straight into this trap, which decapitated it. And I'm going to post a link to the photograph. There are people that have said that this is a reptilian, etc. It's not a reptilian, it's a Djinn. But there's much more information to get your head around this. So the situation is, one of the telepathic abilities of these things can actually take over a human being and manipulate a human consciousness in the same way as, the communication of ETs and telepathy and all this. All this is possible. And if you do some research into scalar waves, which are what we as human beings generate, which form the world around us, it's through the scalar energy or the thought energy that we emit while we're thinking. But anyway, these beings are in a position to manipulate people. Now, the skull and crossbones comes into this because the Knights Templar used to give a service to the villagers. A long, long time ago, there was lots of magical practices that have all been occulted and hidden, and Vaticans took them away in spell books and all sorts of other things. It was commonly thought at one time the earth was flat, but the point is, these practices were widely used and widely known, as in magic, a long time ago, and this is why they had the witch burnings, etc., to try and get rid of the knowledge, because it empowers people to know it, basically, and they didn't want that. In order to control the masses, they need them exactly where they tell them to put them. Anyway, so the point being, these Djinn could actually take over the recently dead bodies of these people, which is where your term zombie comes from. But anyway, one of the services that the Knights Templar used to offer was to decapitate the recently dead in case that one of these creatures got the use of its body. And that's where your skull and crossbones comes from originally. It's about what the Templars used to do is go in and cut the head and the legs off the dead and bury them. And that's where the flag initially came from. They offered that service. But we are talking a long time ago. Well, I mean, there's a lot to go into, but we're talking about a long time ago when magic was widely used and widely known about. But that, in a nutshell, that's what it is. And I'll just find that link so we can show the viewers a photograph of one of these creatures.
Yeah, if you can stick it in the chat facility there. JayPee, are you familiar with the Djinn?
Right. Well, there's one story I have, which is a lovely story, which was when the British brought the trains over to India, and the guys would always be standing around, and they would sort of have this look on their face, and they would be pointing to the trains and saying, "In Djinn, there's a Djinn inside there that's making this work." And the person who communicated with the spirit was called the engineer. And that's where we get engine and engineer from. It's like an anglicized version of their exclamation. But there's loads of inhabitants of this planet. Inside, underneath, on the top. Out here on the surface, this is the most vulnerable part of the planet. There's all sorts of crap that comes from from space, which, by the way, is a very interesting thing. I just want to come back to the wave, right? Because it's a very interesting thing, because I believe right now. Remember what we were talking about earlier with the passing using a microwave of the frog and the salamander eggs.
Yep.
That this is done using frequency, using microwave frequency. This wave is everything. If you could imagine, it's like playing all the keys on a piano all at the same time, possibly for 8 minutes. That'll be the front of it, but it's never. I don't think it's really going to go away. I think that there's this wave front, and that's where the evolution is going to come, because it's like it's another part of our soul. Our part, we are expressions of the central part of the galaxy. The planets are expressions of the Hunab Ku, of the dark rift. The black hole is producing everything in our galaxy, and so we are part of it. And if for want of a better word, we could call that God. We could call that consciousness God. Because it is a consciousness. The galaxy is a living being. We are moving through living waters, and everything is alive, and light is living. And so there literally is traveling light. It's coming at sublight speed. It's like what we call light, photons. But it's also going to be lots of other things. Like I said, it's all the notes on a piano extending into infinity and down into infinity. So there's frequencies on all levels that are going to hit us, and those frequencies are what will evolve us. Because there are certain frequencies in there that are like ultraviolet, which are the DNA frequency. DNA has a specific frequency. I actually bought a torch that has this. It's a commonly available frequency of light. It's a kind of purple-blue color, and that is the frequency of DNA. And I imagine that using that frequency of light, it might be possible to heal DNA damage and maybe even cancer. And that was the big shock that was in the source field investigations, that there was a frequency that can cure cancer. I'm investigating this currently. I haven't tried it on anyone. Anyway,
well, we have a question.
Back to the wave is that we're going to get this big burst. You might not need a pen and paper, because you might evolve into a being that can remember everything. That's all I'm saying.
That would be fantastic. I have a question here. Tony's going to get the link for the Djinn information. As I say, guys, to the listeners listening, having JayPee and Tony on, we could talk for 5 hours, and we can never cover the areas that we talk about, because I know, as I say, it's a treasure trove of information between JayPee and Tony. And so I'm really, only asking JayPee and Tony to touch base just, on these subjects, because one subject alone you could talk for hours on it. But this is why it's great having both JayPee and Tony on, because I know I can throw a subject at them and they can just talk about it, which is, really what this is why I look forward to having JayPee and Tony on the show. Now, we have a question here, and I want to put it to Tony, and then Tony, we'll put it over to JayPee. The question is, the skull and bones isn't of Geronimo's skull. Does that make sense to you guys?
For me personally, I know it's not. It was way before Geronimo was on the scene. But we're going back to Knights Templar now. which is way before Geronimo.
Okay. Does that make sense to you, JP?
I would imagine it's a very ancient symbol.
Right. Okay. Just touching base again on the wave. One of the things I came across a few weeks ago, it was a guy was talking about the difference between love and fear and the emotions that we experience. And you know that we feel everything. Our DNA picks up everything. And they were looking at energy as a sine wave. And they were saying they had a strand of DNA. And what happened was, when somebody was in fear, the sine wave would go it wouldn't hit all the DNA strands. It would miss up and down and miss quite a few. But when you see in the actual sine wave for the love, every DNA strand was touched with this wave. And what they were saying was, that's how we will evolve, and that's how we have to evolve, by finding, I know it's a cliche, but finding the love. You know, getting out of this fear-based society, fear-based system, and finding the love. And that will help us activate our DNA as well.
I have a little tip.
Go ahead.
I've been actively trying to eliminate fear from my life and fear from my response, certainly. Because I'm a naturally sensitive person, and naturally sensitive people are often very fearful because the world is a dangerous place, and people do attack you even with their thoughts, and you can feel it. So what I came to, you know, I used to drive down the road, you know, and I didn't have tax or anything like that. So whenever I had the thought, oh, here comes the police, or, you know, I better think about the police, I would divert my thoughts. And, you know, everybody's got someone or something that they love, that they truly love, that they really can't do without, and that fills them with a warm glow every time they think of them. Well, if ever you have a fearful thought, immediately divert your thoughts to that person or that thing or that, you know, it might be your kids, it might be whoever it is, it might be your dog. Whatever it is that gets you in this state of love, practice going there, practice connecting with it. And the more you do that, the more you'll kind of lever yourself up out of the fear and the worry and all that stuff, that mental stuff. You don't need it, because you just go straight to your heart. It's through the heart that we get through this, my brothers and sisters. I really, really believe it. It's through the heart. And the heart is sensitive. The heart listens. The heart is not egotistical. The heart is inclusive. It's very easy to spot these things. You know, it's like the heart says yes. The heart says just be. The heart doesn't try and improve anybody. The heart isn't out to get anybody. The heart is receptive. It's the opposite. You know, it's actually a feminine quality that you would find rarely in males and you know, abundance in females. But it's partly we need to bring the male and the female parts of us together, all of us, you know, the men and the women, you know, because women have male parts that they don't acknowledge so much, but it expresses in their life. So it's really good to get to a place where you can find something that you love and kind of use that to lever yourself out of any fears at all. Yeah,
just think of something positive. I have a question here for both of you. I'll pop this off to Tony, and I hope I get the pronunciation right. The question is from somebody on TNS. They say, have the guests ever studied the Urantia book? Urantia book? Urantia book. Tony?
Not me personally, no, I have to admit. No.
No. JP?
Right, okay.
All right, let's make it 5 minutes.
The Urantia book is like a kind of Bible thing. It's got a bigger story than the Bible. It's written more clearly, but I still think it's a psyop. I came into contact with it in about 7 years ago, where a guy was going to look for Atlantis, and they said because in the Urantia book they said that Atlantis was in the Mediterranean under the waters, And, there may be part of it that is there. And actually, it was, my ex-wife was involved. It was a very strange story. But essentially, the Urantia book is, there's a group of people around, and they call them readers. Looks like we got ourselves a reader. So people who follow the Urantia book are readers. It's like, imagine if you had 3 volumes of the Bible, where what we call the Bible is 1 volume. And, there's lots of groups around here, but I still believe that it's part of the Course in Miracles, Eileen Caddy, it's Tavistock. It's the same story that Tavistock. It's a fake story, I believe.
Okay, I don't know much about it myself, so I can't really comment on that. But do you feel, guys, that with any extra? I'm just watching the time here. We're going to be going to the pre-record shortly, but I'll just throw this to Tony first. We talked about the Djinn. Do you feel that there is a control through Tavistock, and they actually know how to manipulate these people who would call themselves mediums and stuff like that? Like, I know you always get your genuine people, but are people being fooled by Tavistock or Djinns? Or Tony, do you think that's a possibility?
It's not a possibility, it's a fact. There's no question about it. The Tavistock Institute, yeah, exactly. It was set up to do just what it's doing, run PSYOPs, etc. Just on this note, I've put the link into our chat here, Alan. It's been in there for a while. So if you can post that, that'll be good. But yes, okay. The whole point is we are being run on this planet by an industrial military complex. It wants war, it wants destruction, it wants everybody to keep looking in the wrong direction so that we don't start looking at the controllers or the powers that were or be or whatever else you want to call them. We have incredible technologies, all of which have been hidden. They want everybody with famine, death, disease, destruction. The CDC actually manufactures disease. It doesn't manufacture cures. It does vaccines, but hey, we've covered vaccines. The point of the matter is everybody, in order to control the masses, they need everybody looking in the wrong directions. So they've manufactured everything from religions to Coronation Street and EastEnders to keep everybody looking at where they want them to look. And they don't want anybody to look at where the truth of the information is. And so, yes, of course we are being controlled. Of course we're being dumbed down. Of course they're putting fluoride in the water and chemtrails in the air and all the rest of it, and pesticides on the food. And of course it's a detriment to the masses because they want to control the masses to keep them down. It's simple. It really is that simple. None of these things could all be happening by accident. Again, I look at the protocols of the Elders of Zion as well. You need to know what those are, because when you read them and just check, look up from the book now and again and check, is that happening? Yes. Every single protocol, right the way through. I know they've said they've tried to make it out, it's not real. Look around you, and then you tell me those protocols aren't real. Yes, they're real, and yes, it's a control grid, and yes, we're the chapel within this control grid right now, and it started with our birth certificates, and we are actually captives within this prison planet under these systems to control all of us and keep us dumbed down, in a nutshell, basically.
Okay, and JP, just quickly, do you think that it's Tavistock that these mediums are being controlled by?
Tavistock controls an awful lot, and they're so good at it that we don't even know.
Unbelievable, isn't it? It really is. Yeah. I mean, how much we don't know of what's going on. Okay, guys, listen, we're going to come back down to Earth for a minute. Earlier on today, I did a pre-record of 2 chaps called James and Paul, and they were arrested unlawfully by the Gardai Síochána and jailed, and they actually had a court case, and they did 1 or 2 things to stop that court case from happening, but they're actually going to do a few more bits. So what I want to do is I want to play this audio clip, and I want then obviously to talk to Tony and JP about this and see what they think about it. So we're just going to play this clip, and it's about 20 minutes. So but have a listen, because this could be anybody. This could happen to anybody in Ireland at the moment, and the way things are going. So we'll be back after this. Okay, I'd like to introduce James and Paul. James and Paul was recently arrested unlawfully by the Garda Síochána down the country. We'll get the details off James and Paul. Good evening, James and Paul. How are you doing?
Not too bad on yourself, Alan.
Not too bad. All right, Paul. James, let's start off with you. Just tell us what happened about this unlawful arrest, and we'll get a few more details off Paul in a minute.
Okay, Alan, but before I go into the actual arrest, I just want to point out that I'm not doing this interview because I want to bash the Gardaí. That's not the case at all. I'm doing this interview because I believe that an awful lot of Gardaí have been mistrained in how they use the Public Order Act and other elements of law as well, and especially in relation to the rights of people. Now, nobody could ever say that I'm anti-Gardaí because I was kidnapped myself from a petrol station back in January 2000 by armed raiders and tied up and thrown into the boot of a car and nearly beaten to death. And only for two Gardaí that were on duty that night that stopped that car, I wouldn't be here.
Okay, so as we say, it's not about being anti-Gardaí at all. It's just at the end of the day, the Gardaí have certain powers, and there is a handful of guards out there who actually are abusing these powers against the sovereign citizens of Ireland.
Well, I'd say there's a lot more than a handful. I'd say there's a good percentage of them because they haven't been trained correctly. So you know, they don't believe. A lot of them don't believe they're doing anything wrong, and that was actually quite evident that night, where there was two Gardaí. I believe the younger Gardaí was totally unaware, and the older Garda, who seemed to be training the younger Garda, was quite aware of what he was doing.
Okay, so he was training the younger Garda, and basically what happened when they realised that obviously you knew a little bit of information, he probably lost face. He probably thought he didn't want to lose face, so what he did is he just carried on regardless, because he didn't want to lose face in front of the new recruit. Maybe that's what the issue was.
I get Paul to tell the story. Paul's quite good at telling the story, so...
Okay, Paul, tell us what happened there.
Okay, right, well, first of all, I fully agree with what James just said there. You know, I'm never in trouble with the guards. I don't have a problem with the guards. I don't want to get the guards. But I do have a problem with injustice, and we all have a big problem with injustice, and it's only going to get bigger if people don't realise their rights and realise their situation vis-a-vis the guards. The guards work for us to keep the peace, and that's their job. We all have our own jobs, and, you know, I'm an engineer myself, and if I go out to work one day and make up the laws of physics, people that get killed, I have the laws of physics, and I follow them, and that's not a big issue. That's what you do. And the guards follow the law, and that's their job. So when they don't follow the law, then people have to stand up and go, sorry, you may think one thing, but the truth is another thing. The law is the law, and that's it. So this is about pointing out that they need to uphold the law. So what happened on the night was, we were out for like a couple of drinks with some friends. We're actually having a meeting. And we finished the meeting, and three of us were standing outside a hotel, and the guards drove up to town, and we were chatting away. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and it's a small village. We do this all the time. It's where you live. You're allowed to stand on the street talking to your friends. That's not against the law. So the guards drove up, drove past us into a car park, came back and stopped and rolled down the window and said, "Are you okay here, lads?" And we said, "Yeah, we're fine, thanks." At which point they then said the next question was, "What's the names?" And we went, first of all, if you know, the media thought, if you don't engage somebody and see who they are, you don't demand their names first off. That's a ham-fisted approach to something. So they demanded our names, and we said, we just started asking questions. We said, "Are we obliged to give you our names, guard?" And they went, "Yes, you have to if we demand them." And we went, "Well, has there been a crime committed?" And they said, "No." And we said, "Well, what's the problem then?" And they said, "What's your names?" They kept demanding our names. And we said, "Guard, has somebody made a complaint against us?" And at which point they got out of the car and came over to us and continued to demand our names in quite, I won't say aggressive, but they wanted the names, and that was it, you know.
In a forceful way, yeah.
And we were completely sober. We're, you know, respectable people. And we just asked them questions. We said, "Guard, you know, has somebody, you know, has there been a crime in the area? Are we under investigation for a crime or something?" And they said, "No, why are you being so evasive?" And we said, "Well, we're not being evasive. We're just asking you if we're obliged to give you our names." And we then asked them, "Were they peace officers?" And they said, "Yeah." And they said, "Has there been a breach of the peace?" And they said, "No." And they said, "Look, if you don't give us your names, we're going to arrest you." And we said, "Well, under what law are you going to arrest us?" And he said, "Section 24 of the Public Order Act." So we said, "Okay, what does that say? Like, what's the wording of it? Can you quote it for us, please?" And of course they couldn't. which is, you would think that they would be able to. See, they're arresting people under it. So they couldn't, and these questions kept to and fro for a little while, and at the heel of the hunt, the guard arrested me. Well, first of all, he asked us for our names repeatedly. So James eventually went, okay, my name is James. And I went, my name is Paul. And the other guy told him his name. And he said, where do you live? And I said, well, I live around here, and I have lived here for a long time. And the guard asked James for his surname, and James goes, that's my private details, you know, am I obliged to give it to you? And it seemed to be that the guards they'd never had anybody asking them these questions. People are allowed to ask questions. That's not against the law. So we said, guard, look, unless there's been a crime committed and you have reasonable cause to think that we committed the crime, we lawfully don't have to give our names to anybody. So sorry, but, you know, you've no backup in law here to demand anything of us. We haven't done anything. So they arrested us and they put the handcuffs on me and didn't throw me into the car. One guard went to manhandle me into the car, and I said, look, I can get into the car myself. Handcuffs hurt.
They actually twisted the handcuffs up, Paul, before they put them on, didn't they?
They twisted the handcuffs on, and, you know, if you have handcuffs, there's a bit of play in the chain of handcuffs. You know, I haven't been handcuffed before, but I've watched plenty. I've seen handcuffs, you know. And they have chain on them. So you would imagine if they're on, there's a little bit of play. You can move your wrists a bit. Well, the guard twisted these handcuffs so they couldn't play, and they were digging into my wrists immediately without me doing anything. And I was so hurt. And I said to him in the car, I said, these handcuffs really hurt. And he looked around and kind of smiled and went, they do hurt, don't they? And I was going, this is just unacceptable. I'm a respectable guy standing on the street where I live, and now I'm in the back of a Gardai car getting hurt by people who work for me. So they drove us to the Gardai station 8 miles away in Arklow. And we said to them all the way, what's your reasonable cause for this? What crime has been committed? And they had no answer. And eventually, like about 15 minutes into the journey, they said, we got a call that said that there might be some crimes committed in this area over these coming days. And we said, okay, so you got a call that said there might be some crimes committed, so you thought that we might be the people who might do it, so you arrested us. There's no law that says you can do that. So we pointed this out to them, and they were going quiet. And we arrived at the station. We went in, and there was a sergeant on duty there. And James said to the sergeant, first of all, they took the handcuffs off, which was good. And he said, Sergeant, can you explain why your 2 men here have kidnapped us off the street and brought us here unlawfully? And he laughed. He goes, what's the problem? And the guard said, failure to give a name. And he says, why didn't you give them your name? And we said, we started the same questions with him. Are we obliged to give you our names? And he said, look, just give us your names. And we went, listen, I'd like to, we don't have to. This is the point. It's not East Germany where people can whip you off the street. So he said, we're not trying to cause a problem here. We're just standing. You guys have caused the problem. And there's no backup in law for it. So James said to him, what about the Constitution? Article 40.5 of the Constitution. And the sergeant goes, what's that? And James goes, it's the fundamental rights of the citizen. And he laughed at him. And he goes, here, talk about the Constitution. It's too late in the night to talk about that. I'm not interested. And he walked off. So in the station, we said to them, listen, we're in the station here now. Quote the legislation that you're arresting us under. And I said, well, we're in the stations. One would assume that you have hard copies of it here. So let's take Article 24 of the Public Order Act out, put it on the table, and we'll all read it, see exactly what it says. And they wouldn't. So eventually they said, look, just give us your names and we'll forget about the whole thing and we'll drop you home. We won't charge you. So we said, okay, after a while, I said, it's a waste of our time being here. Let's do that. So we gave them our names. And then they threw us in cells. They said, let's just step in the cell for 5 minutes while we process it. So they kept us in the cells for an hour. Then they brought us out, and then they charged us when they said they wouldn't. And I went, what are you charging me for? I already gave you my name twice, and you said you wouldn't. And the both of them said, we never said that. And I said, you did say that. Like, what are you doing? Why are you lying to people? What is this what you do every night? And so they charged me anyway and said, right, you're on bail, appear in court in a couple of weeks. And I was shaking my head, I was going, this is just unacceptable. So then he showed me the door, brought me to the door, when he was supposed to drop us home 8 miles, opened the door, let me walk out and said, have a nice day, and shut the door. And I said, you said you were going to drop us back home. And he says, no, we're not insured to carry you, which is a lie. So they left us at 4 a.m. in the morning in Arklow, which is a kind of a dangerous town, with no way home,
Yeah.
For no reason. So that's what happened on the night.
That's, that is really, really, really bad, and that really puts the guards in a very, very bad light. And if this was replicated around the country, then something has to be done with this, Paul, because, and I know I was talking to James just before we started talking to you about this. And, I mean, are you looking at yourself, are you looking to bring this up somewhere? Are you going to bring a case against the Ombudsman about this?
Well, James, do you want to tell him what's happened so far?
Yeah, well, what's going to happen is that, well, first of all, that we attended the court. We attended court the week after, and the case was up for hearing while we were out on bail. We were prisoners of the state officially, and then we had to go back to court a month later, the 21st of November. And myself and Paul had drawn up a very strong affidavit that was signed by a local solicitor in Arklow. And on the strength of those affidavits, and from another witness as well, that the case didn't even get heard, it was struck out immediately on the morning of the 21st. So we have a very, very strong case for compensation for false arrest, false imprisonment, and breach of constitutional rights, and also the Convention on Human Rights as well, 2003. So there's many ways that we can look at this or go about it. So the plan is that we're going to go to the High Court and put in something called a plenary summons, and we're going to call in the Attorney General, Alan Shatter, the Minister for Justice, and the Commissioner of the Gardai, and we're going to make this a very big case. We're not going to go to a low court, a district or circuit court, which not even recognised in the Constitution. They're known as the lower courts. We're going to straight to the High Court, which is what I advise everybody to do if they have any complaints at all in relation to unlawful arrests from Gardai. You go straight to the High Court, to the highest court there, under the Supreme Court, and go for it that way. So that's the next step.
Well, I think you're right to do it, and also the Gardai Ombudsman needs to be that needs to go on their record, their professional record, because that's bang out of order now. I'll quickly. I was talking to you, James, about a family member of mine who was he was stopped by a female guard, and when she realised that basically she couldn't get him on anything, all his paperwork was fine, she picked up something. I don't know the exact details. I'll have to find out myself, but she picked on something anyway, which is completely irrelevant. And basically, what happened was, she said that he didn't have insurance when he did, something like that anyway. So, to cut a long story short, he was sent a summons, but they sent the summons to the wrong address, so he never received it. Then all of a sudden, 3 guards turn up and pick him up and bring him down to Mountjoy. For my sister to get him out, she had to pay €1,500 bail money to get him out. They wouldn't let him out until she had to get the money. Now, my sister knew that female guard was completely bang out of order. She was completely wrong. So when she went to a solicitor, as I said to you, sometimes the apples don't fall far from the tree. When she went to the solicitor, the solicitor said, you know what you should do? You should actually just leave this case. He's out now and you got your money back and all that kind of stuff. And she said no. She said they broke his constitutional rights. She was bang out of order, and I'm not accepting this. So basically, she carried on with the case, brought it to court, and she won the case. Because now, hopefully, and my sister seen the female guard in the court, and she did say to a woman in the court, I believe, that this case is not going to disappear. This case is going to carry on through the courts, because these people have to know that they're not Dirty Harry. They can't go out and start abusing their powers and think they're God. As Paul said, you have to stick by the laws of physics. You can't break the laws of physics, so why should they be allowed to break the laws? And this kind of laughing that you're in handcuffs and laughing at the Constitution, well, they need to be reprimanded for this. They really do. And I'm not tarring, as I say, this is not it's not anti-guard, because there's good guards out there. And as you said, Paul or James, that the guards, rescued you when you were when the Raiders came in. This is not anti-guard, and I don't want people to think it is. But there's, like anything, there's always a handful of bad apples in the barrel, and they abuse their powers for whatever reason. And these are the people that need to be pulled back and told, hang on a minute, this has to stop. You can't do this. People who are having a talk on the side of the road, it's none of your business unless they're committing a crime.
Yeah.
So tell us about this Article 24.
Article 24 is the public order. It gives the Gardaí the powers of arrest, yeah?
Yeah.
But only where there has been a crime committed or a crime in the process of being committed, yeah?
Yeah.
And that's the only time they can demand you for your name and address. Now, how the actual the article and the subsection of the article is actually worded, you see, is quite misleading. And I think that a lot of the problem is actually how the legislation is actually written, because the Gardaí, they just, they ream off, subsection 1 and ignore subsections 2 and 3, which is what gives the power to the Gardaí under subsection 1. Right?
Yeah.
So subsection 2 and 3 refer to the fact that it needs to be reasonable cause. And if you look at reasonable cause in Black's Law Dictionary or any other dictionary, it says look at probable cause. And if you look at probable cause, it's quite clearly states that there has to have been a crime committed or a crime seen to be committed before any powers of arrest are enacted.
And we have to look at the word obliged. And if you look up at Gartner's legal dictionary, which is what I have, the word obliged is voluntary, it's not mandatory. And even if they say, we demand your details, even demand is voluntary. I demand somebody to jump up and down, doesn't mean they have to do it. I just demand you do it. But it doesn't mean they have to do it, And this is why I would recommend people to get a legal dictionary. Gartner's legal dictionary, the second edition, I got on Amazon for something like €18, very cheap. The third edition is about 50 quid, but the second edition is only about €18. And I recommend you get a legal dictionary and start looking up these words and see what they mean, because when you start reading them, you realise that actually, things like they're saying you are obliged to give the police your details. Well, yeah, you might be obliged to, but doesn't mean you have to.
Well, equally as important as getting a legal dictionary and seeing what the words mean, which is very important because it's a different language. The words have different definitions than we're used to. It's important to read the legislation. So, for example, the Public Order Act. We had a bit of an idea about the Public Order Act whenever this happened, but we've since read it a lot more closely. And it says very clearly those guards arrested us under Section 3 and 4 of the Public Order Act. But without acknowledging or realising that Section 2 is what defines how we can arrest people. And I'll just read it out here now. The Section 2 Subsection 2 of Section 24 of the Public Order Act says, where a member of the Garda Síochána is of the opinion that an offence has been committed under a relevant provision, the member may demand the name and address of any person whom the member suspects with reasonable cause has committed or whom the member finds committing such an offence. So that states very clearly there has to have been a crime and they have to have reasonable cause to suspect you of the crime. Now, we know of lots of occasions, including this one with ourselves, where the Gardaí come up and just threaten people with the Public Order Act. It's like Public Order Act is just this one phrase that they can arrest and threaten people to do for nothing, anything at all, standing on the street in their way. And they threaten people with the Public Order Act. And the threat, of course, is that they'll arrest you, they'll take you to court, and you'll be in big trouble. Now, we stood our ground and went, sorry. Now, we didn't argue with them. We just kept asking them questions. We said, is it not the case that there must have been a crime committed? And the shocking thing is that not only did they say, no, there has been no crime committed, they actually said there doesn't need to be one. And we said, has there been a breach of the peace? And they said, no, and there doesn't need to be one. And we said, has there been a complaint against us? And they said, no, and there doesn't need to be one. And also, when guard actually arrested me, he put his hand on my shoulder and went to put the handcuffs on me, and I said, look, I'm not resisting. This is under duress, and I don't consent to this. And he said to me, we don't need consent. Now, that's shocking because it proves that not only have they not read or understood the Act, they've actually misunderstood it. They've learned it wrong. So, like I said earlier on, this section of the Public Order Act is 7 sentences. It's not difficult to learn it off by heart, and they should know what it says. So, the point is that what we've proved is when you stand your ground and go, sorry, I know because I've read it that I'm not obliged to give you my name. Now, if I am, I will. I'm not trying to cause a problem, but if I'm not, then I won't, because it's not East Germany here. You can't just come up and arrest people and demand the details of people when there's no backup in law for that. So what we've proved is when you stand your ground, it goes to court and you win. Everybody needs to do this. It's very empowering to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, what's important as well is to have good documentation put into the court or into the Gardai before the case comes up, because the DPP will look at that.
Definitely. Well, any evidence that you have, recorded video, audio, I think is very important. But lads, listen, thanks for coming on to the show. Much appreciated. Keep us posted on what's going on, and we'll get you on again. We'll get an update. But thanks for coming on to the show.
No problem.
Here's Alan.
All right, so there you go. So that was an interview with James and Paul about their experience and what happened. Now, JP and Tony are obviously in the UK. I'll just go over to Tony. Tony, have you heard of any instance like this happening over there where you are?
Have I heard of any incidents? Yeah, there's been a couple, to say the least. But what we need to understand is what's actually going on here. The root cause, if you like. What's actually going on is when we're all born as people, we have a birth certificate, and our parents sign that birth certificate. That birth certificate then gets monetized, basically, so money is printed off the back of that birth certificate. So what's actually happening here in a nutshell is that all the money that's printed on somebody's birth certificate is in lieu of the future taxes that these people are going to generate. So they're using us as basically chattel. And what they needed the name for was to access the birth certificate, or should I say, to access the birth certificate or the name. In other words, the name is in capitals. In order to actually fund what they're actually doing, they have to access the SESKV accounts of those individuals. So they need the names to access those accounts. And this is what's actually going on. But it's people need to get their heads around this stuff initially to figure out what's actually been happening to all of us while we've all been asleep, and that's basically what's going on. There is a hidden system that's operating behind the scenes, all about money and control, and what the police or what the Gardai needed to do was get them to give the name so that they can then look up the name, access the birth certificate bonds, which are backed off the birth certificates that their parents signed, and access their SESKV accounts to take the money out to fund the whole system. It's a massive con. The laws are a con, the systems are a con. All of this stuff has all been rigged against us on massive levels. And in a nutshell, that's what's going on. I spoke to James actually, I think it was 48 hours after he was actually arrested, and started going through some of this stuff with him. But he was a bit too traumatised to take it all in because it's huge.
Yeah, it's
but
massive.
Yes,
yeah.
I have.
JP?
To be sure, yes.
What's your take on that yourself?
Well, I've really got very little experience in knowing about law. I've had a few shows with people, and I'm learning a little bit, but I never read acts because I'm having a bit of a problem reading paper things at the moment, or anything. Just there's not enough time to do all that stuff. So I kind of leave it up to my brothers and sisters to work out the detailed laws. As far as I'm concerned, all that is statute, and I don't understand it, which means I want to get back to that because I said it at the beginning, and it's not like because I'm stupid. I don't understand it means I don't stand under it. That means I'm not standing under their law. I'm standing under cosmic law. I stand on galactic or planetary law, which is natural law, which is common law, which is if there ain't a victim, there ain't a crime, and just any violation of that's violence and requires balancing. So so I don't know very much about. I've heard about the birth certificate and the big capital account that is attached to, and the national insurance is nothing to do with what we think it is, and that national insurance is actually our life insurance. So when we die, they get a bunch of cash. So that's why they like to see us die, because we're all insurance policies, and it's what do they call it? Not commoner insurance, peasant. I think it's called peasant insurance. Or peasant in policy. Do you know anything about that, Tony?
I'm not sure about the peasant insurance. I do know that insurances are all a scam, yes, and you were quite right about this is why when people die, one of the first things that happens is that our SKV accounts are cleaned out, and that means if you dine in hospital, the hospitalia or the military wing will actually clean out your accounts using your QSIP numbers. Again, this is a very deep subject, but this is basically what's going on. We're cattle, and they are accessing the money that was actually intended for us, which has all been hidden away, and they're using debt as money instead of our God-given inalienable rights, as in to be able to drink the water and eat the food of the land without getting paid, without getting charged for it. So this whole system is a construct. It's all been set up against us, and the whole lot is coming down, and I can't wait to see it.
Well, this is it. I think it is coming down. Well, we have about 14 minutes left, guys. So what I'd like to do is obviously go over to Tony. And Tony, give us your words of wisdom. Now, obviously, it's your words of wisdom on what you feel, what people should be doing, what they should be looking at, they should be focusing on. And then we'll go over to JP, and we'll get JP's take on that as well. Because I think, people need to start focusing with this change that's taking place 2012 around the corner. If anything happens, as I say, there's so many people have different scenarios as to what may happen, what may not happen. So if you want to give us your roundup, Tony, and tell us what you think, or should I say what you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got time before and after this situation that's turning up to reflect on everything that has been and everything that's coming. But what we need to do is try and focus on some of the realities of life. In other words, if you feel within yourself that that things aren't right, then you have a duty to yourself to look at, well, why do I feel it's not right? And in other words, investigate what's wrong so that you know it's wrong and you understand it within yourself. Again, it's about consciousness. If we can raise our conscious levels of awareness about what's right and what's wrong within society, then we can then educate ourselves and make those conscious decisions. That's the very first thing. You need to know what's positive and what's negative, and you can do that through resonating with something or other and deciding for yourself. But you need to look in the first place. Though, if you can't look, you'll never know. It's like me asking a mechanic, can he fix my car, when he hasn't looked at it yet. He needs to know what's wrong with it before he can identify what it is and how much it's going to cost to fix it. And basically, that's it in a nutshell. So, as I say, I mean, what you can do from your heart is obviously there are changes that are coming along, and we are part of those changes. So look on the positive side of things. We're going to manifest an incredibly beautiful future with things that are way beyond our possible imagination right now. And that includes telepathy, all sorts of stuff that you possibly haven't studied already, so you wouldn't be aware of. And it's going to be beautiful. And reference 2012, if there is a darkness that has been talked about, don't consider it the end. It's basically a brand new future, and it's a brand new beginning for all of us. And that's what I would say.
Well, I'm looking forward to it myself. I don't know what to expect, if anything, but I am looking forward to it. JP, what's your take on what people should be doing?
Right, okay. Number one, don't worry. Number two, love as much as you can. Do as much as you can of you loving what you're doing, and do as little as you can of what you don't like doing. Really? I mean, what else does it matter? If you suddenly find yourself with a limited period of time on this planet, what would you do? Would you work every day, or would you make a sculpture or make some painting, make something that will remind the earth that you were there? That's what we're here to do. We're here to create. We're here to make. We're here to build. We're here to leave stuff behind. We're here to express our soul on this planet, and that comes from the heart. Do everything from the heart. Like I said, don't fear. Think of things that bring you into a loving space, not just positive, but loving, because loving can include negativity as well. There's tough love and all of the stuff, because you have to get beyond yes and no. You have to get beyond duality, us and them, all this stuff, because you have to realize that we're all one expression. We're all that trunk of the tree. That's all of us. And the branches and the leaves, well, you know, what's the tree? Is it the trunk, or is it the branches, or is it the leaf? Mm. So the more you identify with the fact that we're all one, and we're all expression of the one, and that one is not some bloke in the sky, but it's the divine consciousness that resides in the black hole at the center of our galaxy. That's what we're one of. We are part of those energy beams that have been sent out from the center to find out, what can I do? What am I? Who am I? You know, we're now able to look back and say, look, that's a galaxy. We
have to ask that question, and I think that's the first thing when people start waking up to self-awareness. Who are we? Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? I know it's a cliche, but hey, what is the meaning of life? You know, so these questions have to be asked. I'm just going to go over to Tony. I'm just going to round up. Tony, give us all your contact information and where people can hear you on and the radio station, your website address, and your book and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. The book, again, is called Blueprints of Cosmic Consciousness, and it's available at awakeconsciousawareness.com, and also available on Santos Bonacci's site, who you really need to do some brilliant research into. It's awesome. Santos Bonacci's site, and also Kate of Gaia's site. Santos can be found at universaltruthschool.com. And Catherine of Gaia, who studies law and ecclesiastical law and all sorts of other things, can be found at www.loveovermind.wordpress.com. We do Freedom Reigns on Blog Talk Radio. We do TCT, These Changing Times, Awake, Aware Radio, and another one, Truth Central. Truth Central on all these different shows, and some incredible stuff we're giving out there.
It's excellent, excellent. And JP, do you want to give us a rundown of your radio station and when you're on and what it's all about?
Sure. I'm a host and producer for Wolf Spirit Radio, WOLF, wolfspiritradio.com. I've also got my own site, which is everbeyond.info. My radio show is Ever Beyond, and you can hear it on everbeyond.info. There's a chat room there, and you can also hear it on Wolf Spirit Radio, and there's a chat room there, which is a different one. And then also on Tuesdays, I'm on Revolution Radio at 8 o'clock p.m. on UK time, which is freedomslips.com, but you can also get it again on everbeyond.info. All my shows, you can hear them on my site as well as the originator stations. And we've got a great team at Wolf Spirit Radio, and we have some great. There's a healer. You got to tune into the healer, Frank Jordan. He will sort you out on the radio. Brilliant stuff. Group mind, morphogenic field, deep to the DNA healing he's doing, and it's happening because of the internet and the internet radio. It is a total phenomenon. Do tune in. My show is at 11 o'clock tonight on Sundays at wolfspiritradio.com or everbeyond.info. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a great pleasure, and especially a pleasure meeting you, Tony, and good luck with your book.
No problem. Well, listen, you guys, you know, I knew when I get you two guys on that, you know, we could go on for 5 hours and talking about subjects. And I knew if I could just throw a subject that one of you, we could just go into it. And just so much to talk about and so little time. But we will come around again. Now, just a couple of things before we shut down. As I say, a big thank you to Tony and JP for coming on. Now, Tony and JP, as I said before at the start of the show, are broadcast their own radio shows. And I was on the Nights of the Round Table on TNS today with a few of the guys, and one of the guys said, because of they listened to OYM and what we said about setting up your own radio show, he was inspired to go ahead and do his own thing. And he is now doing his own radio show. And I'll say this to everybody, and JP and Tony will say, hopefully agree with me, it doesn't take much to set up a radio station. So if you have the gift of the gab and you like chatting, all you need is one computer and a headset. That's all you need, because there's free services out there that you can sign up to, and you can start broadcasting straight away. And you can either share hosting, TNS, I'm sure, if you speak to Vin, Vin might be able to give you a slot on TNS. If not, I'm sure we can sort something out for you. But it doesn't cost money, because there are free services out there. And it's a way of getting your information out, what you want to talk about, and share the information and help to wake people up globally. Because the internet is obviously global. People are turning away from the mainstream media and they're going to the alternative media, which is what we want people to do and listen to, because we are not sponsored by people or companies that were worried about what we're going to say, so they dropped their sponsorship and all this kind of stuff. So we tell the truth, and we say it as we see it. And then it's up to you. If it resonates with you, fantastic. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Well, that's fine. I think that's fair enough to say, guys, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Definitely.
You know, go out and set up your own show, and you know, and if you do need help, by all means, just send us an email, and you can pick our brain, and we'll try and point you in the right direction. Now, for the 21st, just so people know, next week we have Claire Cullinan on from Debt Options. Claire's going to be coming on, and she's going to tell us all about the 325 people, I think, so far, that have gone to the High Court and issued legal cases against the banks. So hopefully we'll be able to get Claire on and talk about that. I'm hoping that we can tie up with the guys down in the Friends First building, the farmers who are doing a sit-in. I'm hoping to try and hook up with them and have a talk with them, and they can tell us the real story, what's going on, rather than what you're going to hear in the media. So if we can do that, that'd be fantastic. And on the 21st of December, we'll probably say this next week as well, but on Friday night of the 21st, we are planning on United We Strike. We are planning a little kind of meeting between myself, Steve, JP, who's on now, Karen Quinn Tostado, Siobhan Ceresi, Humanity Transcending, and also Detlev from Wake News. So we're all going to be on the 21st, on the night of the 21st. That's if we're not in the fifth dimension. And on Sunday, we'll be all on OYM on the 23rd, thinking, either going, wow, that was a fantastic experience, or else we'll be saying, didn't feel anything. You know, so we don't know what's going to happen, but, you know, if anything, it's going to be fun. And I look forward to it myself, you know. So all I'll say is thanks again to JP and Tony for coming on. We'll have to do this again, because there's so much information, guys, that you guys have that, you know, we just have to get out there. But thanks again for you two guys. And just say the best regards to Steve, and I hope his wife gets better. He should be back hopefully by next week, things back to normal. We'll find out from Steve, so good luck to Steve on that. But for now, I just like to say thanks from myself, Alan James. Again, thanks JP, thanks Tony, and we'll see you again, do it all again next week. So take care. Oh, by the way, just very quickly, Tony, the people on the chat are asking about that Djinn photo. Where can they get that Djinn photo?
I've posted it in the chat box here. It's been there since 8 o'clock. Okay,
could you repost it back in there again, Tony, if you can, just in the chat box, in the OYM chat box if you're on there.
I'm not. That's the point. I've got the SMS message under Skype here and posted it right there.
Okay, but if you can send it to me on email, and then what I'll do is I'll put it in the links when we send them out to registered users.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
That'd be fantastic. Okay, everyone, have a good week. Stay safe. And hopefully the weather's not going to be too bad, although they're predicting bad weather. But we'll see how we go. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Open your mind.